Okay, good morning. Let's fix this a little bit. All right, so we're going to start our first day of Monday meditation practices. It's still pouring rain here, so I'm in this little corner, which is probably not where I would usually teach from, but it just goes to show you that you can do your breathing practice and your meditation practice anywhere at all. And that's one of the great things about it, because you can do yoga almost anywhere, but you need at least a certain amount of space. And, in some settings, it might not be appropriate. You need the right clothes, so you're not, nothing too tight. But meditation you can do anywhere you consider stand or lie down. So I wanted to start this first session by talking a little bit about breathing and the connection between breath and meditation. So a lot of traditional, let's say there are traditional meditation techniques in which you pay attention to your breath, and that's the way you learn to train your mind to focus. So there's this practical connection between breath and meditation. But if you think about the whole sort of purpose or promise of yoga, which is a state of union, yoga, one of the translations of the word yoga is union. And union of what? Well, it's union of your body, your mind, and your spirit. And we know our body really well, or at least, pretty well, because we feel it all the time. Our mind, we know, we can witness it. It's very present in our consciousness because it's part of our consciousness. But the spirit or the soul, maybe it's a little bit less, it's more uncharted territory for most of us. And the breath is a good stand-in for that subtle energy, because yes, it is our body physically moving to bring oxygen and other gases into the body and to expel carbon dioxide. But the things that are moving in and out are much less substantial. Yes, they're the molecules and atoms of the gases in the air are physical things, but there is this sense of space and intangibleness that is part of the breath. So breathing is a good way for us to connect to that third aspect of ourselves, that spirit aspect, right? So I wanted to I mean, everybody has a different understanding of your anatomy, and we've all, maybe some of us have had a long time since we looked at our anatomy. So I want to show you a picture. I'm going to share a picture of from a book by Leslie Kaminoff called Yoga Anatomy. And there's a whole first chapter about the dynamics of breathing. And the thing to know and to be really aware of is the relationship between your upper thoracic cavity, which is shown in yellow in this drawing, in this illustration, and the lower abdominal cavity shown in blue here. So there's a direct correlation between what happens in the upper and lower cavities. There's a shape change that happens when we breathe in and when we exhale. So the way that our breath works is when you exhale, there's a almost vacuum in your lungs. There's a low pressure place in your lungs. And an inhalation is just an opening of your breath ways, your nasal passages and your trachea, to allow the oxygen and the air on the outside, which is higher pressure, to fill up that low pressure space in your lungs. And when the low pressure space expands, well, it has to go somewhere, and it's enclosed in your physical body, right? In your skin and your muscles and your bones. So when the lungs expand, it can only go so far before it come up against boundaries. So the boundaries of your rib cage, well, that's why the rib cage is designed to expand and to flare out laterally and a little bit to the front and back. And then it encounters, of course, the upper boundary, and it encounters the diaphragm, which, is kind of represented by this little space here between the upper and lower cavities of the torso. So the diaphragm is a big swath of muscle. If you looked at that diagram from the front, the diaphragm muscle would look like a upside down U or a horseshoe or a saddle. When you inhale, because the lung tissue pushes out into the lungs and it pushes down into the diaphragm has to get pushed down and it flattens. And actually, that's not quite accurate. The diaphragm muscle contracts actively when you inhale, and it pulls downward and makes more space for the lungs to expand. So that's it's the main muscle in your breath, is the diaphragm. So when you inhale, diaphragm muscle flattens, it makes more space for the lungs to fill more completely. And then when you exhale, the diaphragm muscle relaxes, and so do the other breathing muscles in your chest and in between your ribs. Okay. So when you inhale, the diaphragm muscle contracts, this space gets bigger. Well, this abdominal cavity is like a water balloon. It has no openings. Well, not really. Yeah. And it has in this moment, when you're just breathing, there's no opening on either end. So it's like a water balloon. When you squeeze one end of a water balloon, it just bulges out the other side, right? So when the diaphragm presses down, the water balloon just has to move the same amount of contents, the same volume, into a different shape, which is why when we inhale, the belly should, when we're doing a relaxed breath, the belly should rise. And when we exhale and the diaphragm muscle goes back to its original saddle shape, then the abdominals can come back to their original shape. So this whole abdominal cavity, right? And so when we're inhaling and exhaling, we're seeing this movement happen naturally, right? There's an inhale of expansion, and it makes things feel like they're full. And then the exhale is a release, it's like a contraction, we think, but it's actually not. It's just passive, right? So when you inhale, the breath is coming in to fill that low pressure space in your lungs. And then when it reaches the same pressure as the air outside, or even higher, then you can let go and the air spills back out. So the inhalation is the active part. It's creating a bigger area, so there's lower pressure and more air can come in to fill it from the high pressure area outside. And then when you exhale, you just let go and the air comes back out. Okay. So that's what we're doing when we're breathing, physically speaking. Okay. And we can also be aware of the visceral connection between your breath and the different organs in your body. And because the abdominal cavity is so big and it spans a lot of space, and it is encompassing many different organs and organ systems. So when we take deep, full conscious breaths, we're stimulating all the different systems of the body, right? And we're oxygenating the blood, we're stimulating a lot of muscles, but also veins and arteries. We're getting everything flowing and working together. Again, coming back to that idea of like working in unison or in union. So a lot of times we go through our daily life and our mind is somewhere in one place, our body's in a total another place. We're driving the car, but we're thinking about yesterday, and our spirit, who knows, and our breath, we're like not aware of our breath at all often, right? So what we do with our yoga practice is we bring those three aspects into alignment again. And if we do that on a regular basis, then it helps us to be more regulated. It helps us to stay in touch with our bodies, our minds, and our breath. It helps us to be aware. And so we can have more control over the body, what we do with the body, with our mind, what kind of thoughts we're allowing in and nurturing and fostering, and what kind of connection we have to the breath and maybe to spirit. So we're going to start with a really basic breathing practice today. It's called Samavriti Pranayama. And before I explain what that is exactly, I just want to point out that there's a difference between the natural breath and yogic breathing. So when you take a natural breath, you're often not using your full lung capacity. I can't remember the percentage, but I think that in a regular breath, maybe 80% of the time throughout our day, we're maybe using like 30 to 40% of our lung capacity. So that's just natural breath, and that's normal. And then what happens is every once in a while we have a much deeper breath, and then we have more shallow breaths, and it's irregular, generally speaking. But when we do a yogic breath, we're trying to get that full lung capacity, usually with every breath. And then we start to create different patterns and variations in how we expand, how we use the breath. Okay. So it becomes a conscious breathing pattern, because natural breath is unconscious. It's just something that our system does naturally, and we don't have to think about it. But when we bring consciousness in on top of that practice of breathing, and we make this focused awareness on the breath, on the body, on the mind, then it's a different experience. So the first practice that we'll do is we're going to feel our breath in the different chambers of our body. So as you know, and as we looked at and remembered with that slide that I showed you, the diagram that I showed you, we're only breathing into our lungs. But because it creates that shape change when the diaphragm contracts, it feels like, or it can feel like, we're breathing all the way down into our abdomen or all the way down into our pelvis, because that whole abdominal cavity goes all the way down to the bottom of your pelvis, right? So we can feel the breath in different places, even though technically speaking, we're only breathing into our lungs, obviously. But if I say feel the breath in your low back, you know what I'm trying to say. It's not, I know the breath is not going there, but you can feel an expansion there if you focus on that place. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is just rest one hand on the belly. And you know what, before we do that, let's just shake out a little bit. Shake your hands, shake your elbows, shake your shoulders, shake your head if it feels good. If that doesn't feel good, you don't have to shake your head. Shimmy your hips a little bit. Let your hands come down by your sides. Try to shake your whole body. Stretch your legs out and shake them too. Let your toes flop in and out, in and out. Just shake everything out for one more breath. And then exhale it all out. Good. Okay, find your way back into a cross-legged seating position. And you can see that I'm on a cushion because we're going to sit for a while today. We're not doing a full asana practice. So sitting up higher off the ground, lift your hips above your knees, and it just is more comfortable for a longer period because it allows your pelvis to easily stay in a neutral position. So when we sit on the ground, even if you're very open in your hips and it's no problem to sit that way, your pelvis has a hard time staying in neutral position, which is actually very slightly tipped forward. Ooh, the sun is brightening up here. Okay, so once you're sitting on your cushion or your towel, your blanket, just tip your pelvis forward a little bit, like you were going to arch into cow pose, maybe even look up. And then exhale, tuck your tailbone and round your back. Empty out all the air. Inhale back to neutral. Tip forward just a little bit, so much that you feel an arch in your back. Exhale, tuck your tailbone under and try to round your back, look towards your navel. Okay, now inhale back to a neutral spine. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that your pelvis is like a bowl full of water. And when you tuck your tailbone under like you do in cat pose, the water will slosh to the back lip of the bowl. And when you tilt your pelvis forward, that's an anterior tilt, so that the top of your pelvic bones tips forward, and you imagine the water coming to the front edge of the bowl. And if you go too far, the water will spill out. Find a place where you're tipping forward just a little bit so that the water is close to the lip at the front of the bowl, a little bit tilted forward. Okay, and then you can put one hand on your belly below your belly button. Just rest your hand there on your abdomen. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out your nose. And for today, as much as possible, let's try to breathe in and out through the nose. Imagine breathing all the way down into your bottom hand, like we talked about before. Imagine that when you breathe in, you can watch the diaphragm muscle contract and flatten, the abdomen moving out to make space. And then when you exhale, the diaphragm rising to its natural shape and the belly gently dropping back to its natural shape, its original shape. Let's just do that 3 more times. Good. And now take both of your hands and place them on the sides of your rib cage. As much on the sides as you can. You can even, if it's comfortable, put your thumbs kind of behind your ribs. And then inhale and expand into your belly first. And then feel your ribs pressing into your hands, kicking outward and upward. And then exhale, your ribs draw back down, and then your belly returns to its natural shape. Inhale, expand the belly, expand the ribs, empty out, the ribs soften down, the belly drops back. 3 more like that. Inhaling from the bottom up to the ribs, emptying out from the rib cage down to the bottom of your belly. 2 more. See if you can challenge yourself to sip in extra air on your next inhale. When you think the lungs are full, just pause for a moment and then sip in a tiny bit more. And empty it out. Good. Now put your left hand back on your low belly and put your right hand just on your collarbone. So your fingertips touch your collarbones. Good. And then again, you're going to breathe into the belly, then into the side ribs, imagining your hands still there. Then all the way up into your chest where your top hand is. And then empty out from your chest to your ribs to your belly. Do that again. Belly, ribs, chest, empty, chest, ribs, belly. 3 more like that. Filling from the bottom to the top, emptying from the top to the bottom. In these last 2 or 3 breaths, try to feel not just the front body where our hands are, but also the sides and the back of the torso. So you're breathing into the belly, but also the space on either sides of the hips and into the low back. And up the back of the rib cage and the spine, the chest and the throat, and then emptying back out. One more. And when you finish that, release your hands back to your knees and just observe. You can keep breathing, but let's let it be natural breath now. So stop controlling the breath. Just see how it naturally moves in and out. Notice where you feel the breath when you stop trying to control it and you just let it be however it wants to be right now. Notice where you feel it. Notice where is the first place that you feel the breath entering the body. Maybe you feel it at the tip of your nose or in your sinuses or in the back of your throat or somewhere else. And then notice the last place you feel the breath as it leaves. And by the way, with each breath, those places might change, might shift. Our awareness might become more and more refined so we can feel the very spot, the very centimeter, the very point. And then everything between the beginning and the end of the breath. Now, once more, we're going to consciously move the breath, control the breath in Sama Vritti Pranayama. Sama means same, Vritti means movement or fluctuation. So we want to make an even fluctuation of the breath so that the inhale and the exhale looks like a perfect sinusoidal curve or a wavelength diagram. When you inhale, you can count how long to the top of your inhale, just in your own mind. And then exhale and count how long to the bottom of the exhale. Counting inhale and exhale. Keep doing that. And if you notice that one part of the breath is longer than the other, just shorten the longer part for now until they're the same. And feel really comfortable at that place, however many counts long the inhale and exhale are, but making them the same length. Get comfortable with that. And then notice as you're breathing and you have this even inhale and exhale, notice if one part of the breath has more strength or force behind it, and see if you can even that out as well, so that the breath is the same strength and length for the inhale and the exhale. When that becomes easy, you can add one count to the inhale and make the exhale the same. You can start to extend your breath, maybe one count longer on both the inhale and exhale so they remain even. Now, while you're doing this, if thoughts come in to distract you, just witness it, notice it. As soon as you notice that you're not counting the breath anymore, you just kindly and gently, simply bring your attention back. Start counting the next inhale or exhale. Giving the mind a job to do. Count the parts of the breath. Stay with that for a couple more breaths. Now let go of the control of your breath. Let it come back to natural breathing. Just notice how you feel in this moment. Scan through your body. Inhaling, scanning up from your feet, legs, hips, torso, chest to head. Exhale, scanning from the top of your head back down through the torso and the hips and the legs to your feet. Noticing the state of your body. And now look into the state of your mind, the frequency, intensity, quality of your thoughts. Take a deep breath. Exhale it out. Rub your hands together. Good. And bring your hands together in front of your heart. Separate your palms slightly and imagine again the intention that you set on at the first day of this practice. Or if you haven't done it yet, you can set an intention now. To help create and build this state of union between the different aspects of yourself, the body, mind, and spirit. Body, the mind, and the breath. And I'll close our practice with a very simple mantra, Om. Again, you can feel free to sing or just to listen or even to hum along. But I encourage you to allow your voice out. It's a beautiful expression of spirit, and it doesn't have to sound like anything except a sound, your own sound, just like the sound of your voice. Just take a nice deep breath in. Exhale, sigh it out, make a sound. Then we'll sing an Om sound. Breathe in. Om. Thank you so much for practicing with me this morning. And see if you can just notice your breath at any point throughout the day. Just notice, maybe you're cooking or you're talking, you're listening to someone, or you're watching something, or you're driving the car. What if you can just pause and be aware of the breath again and maybe take a few of those deep samavritti pranayams, those even paced inhale and exhale into every part of the body. All right. Thank you very much. Oops. That's what I want to do.